G'day Bomber fans! So I told you in my last video, my match sim recap, that I was going to post an updated best 23. A few of you guys in the comments were asking for it, and I was kind of waiting until I had a reason to do so. But after the last couple of weeks, a couple of training sessions, I've been thinking about the team and how it shapes up, looking at the last best 23 video I did, and I realized that I do have to change it up a bit. There are some guys just not looking as good as I thought they would, and there are some others that are looking better than I thought they would. So we've made some changes to the last team I did. It's time for me to tell you how I think we line up as a fully fit side. I'll probably do another one or two of these before the season starts. And just to clarify, this is a full-strength, fully fit team. I'm not catering for youth or anything like that. I'm including guys that may be injured. I'm just playing a team that I think wins matches for the club. As always, just my opinion. There's no right or wrong. Feel free to go off at me in the comments if I left someone you like out. And subscribe because I've got some pretty big videos coming out, some long videos too. You're going to hear me yap quite a lot in the next few weeks, but let's just get into this one. Just before I get into it, this is my last best 23 I did from last year, I believe, or early this, I think it was last year, last month, I don't know, I don't remember. It was after the draft. I'm not going to go through it name by name. I'm just putting it up on screen for you guys to pause if you want, and so I can talk about who I've omitted and brought into the team, because I have made a few changes. I've made more than a couple, and to each zone as well. So this was my team. Most of you were okay with it. There were a few that didn't like a few things, and in hindsight, some of you may have been right. It's still very early into the year, but the changes I've made to the 23 are purely reactionary from training, and a few of the guys on screen are potentially out of form, and some others were just too good to leave out. There were some criticisms about this team being too tall, which in hindsight is probably fair as well. So let's get into it, starting with the backline as always. Okay, so defense is exactly the same. I feel like there's a solidified back five, and if we're fully fit, we have Ridley, Reed, McGrath, Mackay, and Redmond playing. Those five walk into the team if fit, and honestly, they probably walk into most teams in the comp. Maybe not Reed, but for the other four do. Ideally, those five are playing footy because we actually haven't seen them play together yet. And if they do play together, we're going to have a decent defense on our hands. You can lock in a few to be available and fit. McGrath and Redmond always seem to be playing for us. They're reliable and they provide good leadership out of D50. It's the next three I'm more worried about, and the ideal thing about it is that they're key defenders. So Mackay did play out every game in 2024, but that was a bit of an anomaly. He's battling a niggle this preseason, so he is behind the mark a little bit. I hope that doesn't affect his season too much, because he's become one of our more important players. We need him fit because we simply cannot rely on Reed and Ridley for a full year. Unfortunately, it's at the point where we got to wonder if we'll ever see them both fit for a whole season together, and the odds are we don't. One or both will almost definitely suffer injuries in a season, and that's just the rough thing about it. It's not ideal. It's why Laverty staying on the list was good. It gives us depth, and hopefully Hayes can come through and provide backup. The sixth spot in the back line is up for grabs, and I do have another defender on the bench who I'm just going to talk about now, to be honest. I'm not going to wait till later. So here I have Jackson Pryor. I think he's going to play out most of the season, to be honest. I think he's a really good addition to this team. I've said since before we picked him up, he was really unlucky not to play more at Brisbane, and I don't think he's going to be a star, but he's just going to be a solid defender for us. A decent kick of the footy too. Left-footed, which is really crucial for the modern game. You kind of need both feet in D50 for these outlet kicks, and he's going to provide that for us. He pretty much comes in as a Jake Kelly replacement, although I think his defensive craft is probably, it isn't up to Kelly's standards. I know Kelly copped a bit of flack, but the guy knew how to defend. If you say otherwise, you're just hating on a solid defender. Now, that is our back six on screen. I do have a new arrival into the best 23 on the bench, though, and that is Dylan Shield. So this comes from some really strong training form. He's playing so much off halfback. He's using the ball really well. He's providing good run, good overlapping. I think this almost gives us a reason to move Martin higher up the field. I thought Roberts would be enough, but I wasn't 100% sure. With Shield, I am sold. I think Martin doesn't need to be in defence as much. Shield's defensive work won't be as good, but he can almost act as that winger who starts back of a centre bounce and is used as a seventh defender behind the ball. He can start in the guts and rest in D50. He's going to be like a Dane Zorko 2.0. I'm pretty excited for sure this year. It's probably the only time I've been excited for him since he came across to the club, if I'm being honest, which is a bit sad. I think he can wind back the clock a bit and give us some oomph out of D50. And the good thing is, if he doesn't do that, there are no dramas because we have others who can play his role. The younger players too. Archie Roberts, as I said, Nick Martin. We have quite a few of these midfielders turn defenders, even Zach Merritt. So if Shield plays well in 2025, which I expect him to do, it would just be a bonus for us. It's not a necessity in the slightest, but his good form has been rewarded. I've included him in the team on the bench at the expense of a taller player too, because if there was one criticism, as I said, from my last best 23, it was that the team was too tall. I've taken that into account and brought in Dylan Shield into the side. I think he's proven himself as a best 23 player this preseason. Midfield, there's a slight change or two here. We've got Merritt, Parrish and Caldwell in centre bounces still, with Durham acting as that bench option who's going to run out games on a half-forward flank, pinch hitting in stoppages around the ground. That's going to be his role again, same as last year. He's going to get his fair share of CBAs, but less so than Merritt, Caldwell and Parrish in an ideal world. Those guys, for me, are just pure mids. Although in saying that, Merritt will likely spend his resting minutes in D50 playing as that Shield rebounder, and that's where Shield can come into the midfield a bit. You could have that swapping. I don't think he's done being a midfielder yet. We'll just see less of it. So those three are there. I have Nick Bryan in the ruck. I think he's going to be a really important player for us this year. He's likely going to play a full season, so he is getting the work in early, seeing if he can last out the year, because that's something we hasn't done yet. I should say though, he's of course sharing the load with Draper, who I'll talk about soon. On the wings we have Xavier Dersma. He's a lock, and this other wing is really tough. Last time it was Nick Martin. This time it's Archie Roberts, but I'm not 100% sold on that yet. I think although he showed promise last year, his spot in the team is not 100% locked down. Sardell Hawley could replace him. Martin could spend time on the wing for large portions of the game. I'll talk about where he is as soon as well, but Roberts at least gives you solid ball use, lots of run. He's got defensive traits. I'd be worried about Roberts going head-to-head with a classical winger like Ed Langdon and Josh Dacos. I think Roberts would be fine on someone like Massimo, who isn't trained. He's not a trained defensive wingman. They'll probably just trade disposals, and I think he could run with him and even get a bit of the ball on his own. But someone like Langdon, who utilises his tank in defence, I feel like he could easily shut out Roberts out of a game. So I'm not 100% sold on Roberts in the best 23, although I do think he's going to be a massive part of our future going forward. I really liked that draft pickup, and I really liked the signs he showed last year. But I just don't know if he's 100% a lock for this year's best 23. The midfield as it is, I mean, aside from Roberts and Bryan, who are still question marks for a full season of AFL footy, it's pretty good. And even with those two question marks, there are options behind them. So it's a good-looking midfield with a nice blend of current, ready-made talent and some youth as well. Good blend that we got going there. So some more on the bench to talk about as well, which I'll get to later. All right, the forward line. Now, this zone went through the most change from my last video, which is not surprising because we obviously had that. Well, I guess it's just the one area of the ground that we're most concerned about going into the season as fans. But also in a weird way, I'm kind of the most excited about this zone because we have some new toys there to play with, some young players who are expecting to show promise. So although it might not get the results in 2025, it's a watch for the future. So let's go through it. The tall targets we have are Nate Caddy and Sam Draper, with Carl Langford acting as the third tall. Draper is replacing Peter Wright, who I've left out of the side. I just don't think he's showing enough in training right now. Maybe I'm too late with this, to be honest, because a few of you guys are calling for this, even in the first Best 23 video I made. And I'm not 100% done with Wright. I think he could still be a really handy goal or two a game forward. 35 to 40 goals in a season would be a great return, and it would help us so much. And we've seen him do it before, but I just think we need him to be showing more to trust him with that role, especially if we're going to line up with two rucks. I think it just makes more sense to have Draper playing forward a lot, which is what he's been doing this preseason and looking better than Wright. And that way it gives Langford and Caddy more space, with Harry Jones an option off the bench too. I would love Wright to be firing so I could include him, but he just isn't showing us enough right now. And I've made another change to the small forwards. We've got Nick Martin on the flank for starters. I've moved him off the wing to be that danger man inside 50, but not just that. His run is vital for our team's success, whether it's in D50 rebounding or on a wing running both ways, or here as that high half flank that lends a hand near the defensive arc. Whatever role he plays, he's going to be great for us. And I just think looking at the zones, the forward line is the one that needed the most, I guess it's in need of more of a spark. So I've got Nick Martin on the flank, working high up the ground, running deep in defence like we see with Dylan Moore and Brent Daniels, although Martin's tank is larger than theirs, so ideally he can have more of an impact if he learns the craft. The other two, I mean, Kako's a starter. We know that. He's looking really promising. The last time I had Guelphy in the team over Gresham, but looking at training and the way our forward line is structured, and maybe it's tough because Guelphy's injured, but I just think Kako and Gresham are the most dynamic of the blends that we have. Guelphy is definitely close if fit. It's a 50-50 for me. I think he's a really solid pressure forward and he gives you effort every game. And maybe it's a risk having Gresham over him who's hot and cold. But at his best, with Kako, I think Gresham would be a fantastic player. And we saw it early last year. He looked so good early in the season. He was probably top 5 or 10 in our best and fairest halfway through the year, I reckon. If he can harness that form with a bright young talent like Kako alongside him, it would be really exciting for the team. Those two are really crafty players who will be hard to contain. I've dropped Guelphy, I've dropped Wright. I think it makes our forward line a bit more dynamic, and I guess there's already chemistry on show there from training. Onto the bench, I didn't talk about one omission from the forward line because I wanted to talk about, to justify it here. We're going to start with that. Actually, no, we're going to get to the basic ones first and end with the talking points. So on the bench we have Sam Durham, Harry Jones and Dylan Shield. I've spoken about Shield already. Harry Jones is a really good bench option. He can work up and back on that wing to be an extra target inside 50. He can play as that marking target up forward as well if he needs. He's got versatility, and versatility as a tool, by the way, is even better. It's not great for guys like Nick Cox on the list, but it's great for the shape of the team. Sam Durham, I only really have him on the bench because of versatility as well. I think he's going to play lots of midfield minutes. He's lots resting on a flank, lots on a wing. He's a really great player. I love him to bits. I think he's well and truly one of our best right now. And again, he's only on the bench because he can play anywhere, really. It's kind of a default. I prefer him over guys that I have in the starting 18. That last bench spot I've given to Elijah Sartas. Now, he hasn't been in my best 23 at all since he came across. I've included him in our starting team, maybe, probably not even at all, to be honest. I've never really felt he was ready to play ahead of others, but that's changed a bit this preseason. I've taken out Archie Perkins. I think Perkins is a really capable player on his day, capable of 3 Brownlow votes as we know, but more often than not he just floats through a game, and we've seen that in training this year too. He's had a really solid match sim session on Friday, but before that we was missing a bit. I just think Sartas is in better form right now. He's playing with more confidence. He's working on his game so much. Yes, he's a bit limited to one role. I don't like him resting in other areas of the ground as much as Perkins, but he gives us another option in the midfield, and his ball use has really improved out of sight. He's not as prone to a blunder as he was this time last year. I think it's right we honour his good preseason form, and unfortunately I just think Perkins is on the fringe a tiny bit. I just need to see more consistency from him leading up to the start of the season. It's pretty harsh because as a whole he's been really solid in training. He's had a few quieter sessions that have me worried, especially after that 2024 season, but as a whole he's been pretty well, okay. That hooligan has made me lose my train of thought. I'll just move on to Sardell Hawley. I think I was just talking about Perkins being good in training, but we need to see more out of him consistently. But onto the sub, Sardell Hawley. Honestly, I think this guy is just made for the sub role. I think he's good enough to be in our best 22, starting for a whole game, and he's got the tank for that. But I just really like his versatility. He impacts early as well. He can excite a crowd and teammates. He can play on a half-back flank, on a half-forward flank. He can play on a wing. He can play in so many different areas, and that's why I really like him as the sub, as a high-impact sub option. He's going to play plenty of footy this year, but as the sub, I think it's the fact that you can use him, I guess, for when an injury occurs more than others. So yes, you could have Elijah Sartas as the starting sub, but he can't come on to replace someone like Jackson Pryor or Isaac Kako if they get injured, or Nick Martin. He can't replace all these players, but Sardell Hawley can. And sometimes the sub is someone who's in the best 23, but I guess is versatile enough to fix a hole where it's needed, and that for me is Sardell Hawley, so he is my sub for the time being. Yeah, so this right here is my best 23. I think the good thing now is that we're making changes that don't feel right, aside from Peter Wright, who just hasn't been performing well. That feels right. I've removed players who have shown that they can impact both on game day and in training, and that doesn't feel right a lot of the time, and for the reasons for that is because others behind them are just looking too good to leave out. Sartas and Gresham, they've just been in my best 23 right now because of form alone. Dylan Shield, I've taken into account adaptability a bit more as well. We have a lot of versatility in this particular best 23. We've made it smaller. Sure, height is good on Marvel, but we now have more gut running, which I think is in line with the modern game a bit more, the way it plays out. I like this team, and in an ideal world, everyone is fit so we can line up with it. That would be lovely. We've got debutants, we've got really young players, but we've also got some All-Australian talent and some older guys as well. Obviously, we're probably not going to line up like this. There'll be an injury or two, but as a best 23, it is decent. decent. Let me know what you think down below, though. Are there any changes you would make to it? Anything you think I've got full on wrong? Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. That is all. That's the end of the video. Like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and as always, go Bombers.